Smoother flavor.
Do you remember what it felt like watching the adults crack a beer after a long, hard day? Or perhaps you remember sneaking a taste when no one was looking. Well, either way, beer has been the go-to drink for adults for centuries. But in the 70s, they took over in a way unlike any other. From jingles that stuck in your head to attending every one of your baseball games, these drinks defined your summer, family hangouts, and on a larger scale, your childhood. Sure, not all of us got to get a taste, but that shouldn't stop you from going down memory lane. Join us as we look at some of the 70s beers we love that deserved a comeback, at least so we can know what they were like. Schlitz. When it comes to beers, this was quite literally royalty. I mean, it was the beer that made Milwaukee famous. If you're a 70s kid or maybe an adult, then you definitely remember when a cold can of Schlitz meant the weekend had officially begun. For many across the country, that deep maroon label with the gold trim wasn't just a design. Oh no, it was a signal. Work was over, and it was time to sit back, relax, and see what the bunkers from All in the Family were up to. For most 70s kids, Schlitz was more than a beer. It was a backdrop for a majority of your memories. It sat beside poker chips on Friday nights, rode shotgun on fishing trips, and chilled in coolers at every family barbecue. It was the beer that made Milwaukee famous, and for a time it ruled the American fridge. This was before the light beer craze. Before carbs became our enemies, it was a time when Schlitz was king. You didn't just sip Schlitz. No, you lived it. Until today, many people still consider that first crack of the can to be the sound of summer. I mean, it is quite literally present in almost every badly told uncle joke, every backyard smoke, and of course every neighborhood story you were not supposed to hear. This beer was so popular, it even popped up in movies and old TV shows, always right where the action or the relaxation was. Sure, they changed the formula later and sadly lost the magic. But for those who remember, or wish they could, Schlitz is a time machine in a can. One that leads you to a summer you just can't forget. Sure, Schlitz was the sound of summer, but undoubtedly, cold Olympia beer was the taste of summer. Well, at least for a ton of homes. I mean, their slogan, "It's the water," said it all because, hey, when the water's that good, what else do you need? But nostalgia aside, that simple, cheeky tagline became as much a part of the brand as the beer itself became the go-to drink in the Pacific Northwest. In the 1970s, this beer was the perfect partner for lazy beach days, long drives down sun-soaked highways, and chilled nights around a barbecue. It was basically the go-to drink when you wanted to kick back and listen to something like America and George Martin's Ventura Highway. But if the highway wasn't your vibe, no need to worry, because this drink was Washington's pride, being served up at camping trips, friends' hangouts, and a lot of family gatherings. Even though it had one, it needed no fancy ads because its personality spoke louder than any ad could. Speaking of ads, let's talk about those commercials because they were quirky and full of charm. I mean, who could forget the ever so catchy "Ole, ole, oh, it's the water" jingle? With its golden red cans and rugged Western design, this drink practically screamed refreshing and authentic. It wasn't just a beer. It was a vibe and a major part of growing up. Sadly, in the 80s, competition grew and Olympia slowly faded. But just like any good local legend, it hasn't been forgotten. In fact, even up to today, the Oleo water still has a cult following. So what do you think? Maybe it's time we bring back Olympia. Crack open a can and relive those carefree days. After all, it is the water. Pabst Blue Ribbon. Now this was a classic. Even the name sounds like it walks straight out of a working class poem. The blue ribbon wasn't just decoration. Oh no, it was a badge of honor. Born from the 1893 World's Fair and worn with pride by every cold can cracked open across America. See, it goes without saying that back in the 70s, PBR was everywhere. From dive bars to bowling nights, after factory shifts, and of course, the father-son fishing trips. It was the beer for everyone, the beer for real people. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fussy. It was just cold, crisp, and waiting at the end of a long day. And let's be honest, No one could say no to a can of PBR. And even if you wanted to, that white can with its bold red and blue was enough to change you. It didn't beg for attention, because it knew exactly who it was, and you did too. Packaging aside, taste simply cheap pride. You didn't sip PBR. You drank it all before you even realized you'd opened it. This was the best way to unwind after mowing the lawn, fixing the car, or just swapping stories on the porch with your neighbor, who for some reason knows it all. Sure, it faded for a while, but like any good legend, it made a comeback. And this time in the 2000s. It was the beer that showed up, helped you move out, and never asked for credit. And that right there is why it deserved a blue ribbon. Ballantine Ale. Now this was the definition of old, bold, and gold. Biting 3 interconnected rings, this beer promised you purity, body, and flavor. And whenever you ordered a bottle, you weren't just ordering a beer. It was something more. You were joining a brotherhood. In the 70s, this was the ale of choice for the no-nonsense, every busy business crowd. We're talking dock workers, jazz cats, newsroom grinders, and the occasional armchair philosopher. And why wouldn't it? This beer was cold, bitter, and proud of it. Perfect for anyone who didn't want their drink watered down or, as some would say, dumbed down. This wasn't just a drink. It was a rite of passage. Not the kind you find at a frat house. This was for men who'd seen things, done things. It was for the seasoned drinker, like the father of 4 who just got back with calloused hands and baseball on his mind. It was a drink that bonded dad and granddad. The drink Mom drank at the dining room table with a relaxed smile on her face. To take over America, Ballantine aged this ale in oak barrels and added hops oil for that sharp, full-bodied flavor. I mean, the ad says that Ballantine Ale begins where other brews leave off, and they weren't wrong. It was premium, without the sassiness, and for drinkers who knew their way around a tap and didn't need a fruit garnish. Yeah, it faded. But thankfully, in 2014, Pabst tried to bring it back. And maybe it's time we did too. For the purists, for the old school, for the ones who remember. Falstaff. If Ballantine wasn't your style, then this had to be. After all, it was the original everyman beer. Till today, Falstaff holds a special place in beer history, particularly in the 1970s when it was a household name. This drink wasn't just a cold beverage, it literally was part of history. See, Falstaff Brewing Corporation had a legacy that goes all the way back to 1903 in St. Louis, Missouri. Fast forward to the 1960s, and this brewery had become the 3rd largest brewery in America. But that was just part of the story, because its roots actually go further back to the Lemp Brewery in 1838, which had a unique brewing character and quality, something that would later define the iconic Falstaff. If you had beer in the 70s, then you undoubtedly knew Falstaff as a crisp and refreshing option with a distinct flavor. It was the iconic beer that always seemed to find its way into your hand every time you stepped into a barbecue or bar. People didn't just drink Falstaff, it was a large part of their culture, and was the top beer of choice to enjoy with friends. Not to mention, no game of baseball was complete without a can of Falstaff. From Sunday Little League games to the 1970 All-Star games, Falstaff was there for it all. Every cheer, every boo, every memory with Dad shouting at the ref, you can bet this drink was in the background. You just simply couldn't avoid it. Plus, this simple, bold logo made it stand out on shelves. And the beer quickly became associated with good times and laid-back socializing. For many, it was the beer that defined their weekends and casual get-togethers. But sadly, by the late 70s, Falstaff's reign began to decline. And in the end, industry consolidation and changing consumer preferences caused the company's fortunes to drop, and by 2005, production had ceased. However, for those who remember Falstaff at its prime, the beer remains a nostalgic favorite. Red, white, and blue beer. Just by the name alone, you knew this was the drink for the patriotic. First introduced in 1899 by Pabst Brewing Company, red, white, and blue beer quickly became a symbol of American pride. With its bold red, white, and blue packaging, it stood out as the perfect beer for Independence Day celebrations, as you would expect in a time where patriotism was high. By the 70s, red, white, and blue was everywhere. More than its patriotic story, it wasn't just some fancy brew. It was the beer that cracked open after a long day of work or at a Sunday barbecue with the family. And let me tell you, in Milwaukee, where it all started. This beer was all the rage. I mean, you could get a six-pack for less than $1. At 89 cents to be exact, this beer flew off the shelves. Sounds strange, yes, but your Friday night beer was cheaper than a bag of chips. You still got to feel like you were living the American dream. But like many other beers, it started fading away. Life moved on. Tastes changed, and by the 90s, red, white, and blue was just a memory for most of us. But you know what? Pabst, in a bid to bring back our childhood, brought it back in 2018. Not everywhere, mind you, but in their Milwaukee tap room. And that, my friend, was like finding an old photo album of your youth. For many, it was a little glimpse of the past that still holds a spot in your heart. Rheingold. Okay, now this was the drink for the heart of New York's golden era. Founded in 1856 as S. Liebman's Sons Brewery in Brooklyn, it didn't just stay local, it became a legend, reaching a 35% market share in New York in the 1940s and 50s. Math aside, for decades, if you were in New York, Rheingold was your beer. No questions asked. Even if you didn't want one, that iconic slogan, Rheingold Extra Dry, and that jingle were bound to send you straight to the cooler. No one knows how, but that jingle stayed in your head all day, every day. It wasn't just a beer. It was part of the city's rhythm, its culture. If you know anything about New York, culture is everything. But it wasn't just the beer. Because if you lived in New York in the 40s, you had to know all about the Miss Rheingold contest. For those who didn't, this was an annual tradition where the city crowned a new Miss Rheingold each year. It wasn't just about the beer, it was about the community, the faces, and the charm that came with it. But like many classics, Rheingold started fading away after a few ownership changes. And by the 2000s, it was gone from shelves. But like most things tied to culture, it wasn't forgotten. Today, small-scale craft breweries still keep the flame alive, occasionally brewing Rheingold-inspired beers to give us that taste of nostalgia, that sip of New York's past. Which of these throwback brews brought back memories and made you wish you'd lived through the 70s beer boom? Was it the smooth taste of Schlitz that screamed summer? The chill charm of Olympia's It's the Water? Or maybe the no-nonsense pride of Ballantine Ale and the working-class badge of honor that was PBR? These beers weren't just drinks. They were a vibe, a backdrop to fishing trips, barbecues, and front porch hangouts. Times have changed, but these classics still hit different. Got a favorite or a story tied to one of these legendary cans? Drop it in the comments below. We would love to hear it. And if you're all about that vintage buzz, like, subscribe, and tap that bell for more beer-flavored nostalgia. Until next time, cheers to the golden age of beer.